Good evening, everybody. I'm Avi Rosenthal. I am the chair of the ZWLR Alliance and your moderator for the evening. I guess I should have stood at the podium and then you would have had extra mic. No, it doesn't matter. I am joined here by a really, really cool panel. If I were not sitting here, I would absolutely be sitting there to hear what these people have to say. And I've gotten a little sneak peek of what they're going to talk about, and we're going to blow you all away. Some really cool information. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for being here. This is the second CES 26 Z-Wave Fireside Chat, although we don't have a fireside, but it's all hypothetical. I'm going to let each one of the members of my illustrious panel introduce themselves, and then we're going to dig right into our topic for this evening. But again, thank you very much to all of you for giving up some of your time at CES 2026 to join us here this evening. So with that, Gilles, please.
Hi, I'm Gilles Drew. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at ADT. I joined ADT about 2 years ago. And I looked at the smart home ecosystem with a lens that has to do with scalability, reliability, and what are the consequences of what a smart home ecosystem can lead to.
Hi, I'm Dan Raklowski. I'm a smart home journalist for Consumer Reports. I've been with them for about 8 years, and my work is mainly about reviewing smart home tech for them and providing consumer education and trying to broaden the appeal of smart home to mass market consumers.
Eric Wielander, YouTuber covering smart home tech and Apple, and just helping consumers figure out what smart home tech they want to put in their home.
Paulus Schoutsen, I'm the president of the Open Home Foundation. We build Home Assistant, open source smart home platform that keeps all your data local. And yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
I'm Jennifer Patterson-Toohey. I'm the senior smart home reviewer for The Verge, the technology website. I've been there about 5 years, and before that I wrote for a number of different publications covering smart home technology, and I've been struggling with smart home tech for at least 15 years. So.
She's not just a reporter, she's a user. Okay, so this is a discussion all about the evolution of sensors and the evolution of technology. And I would be remiss if I did not thank our sponsors for this fireside, the group from ADT. This is the second year in a row that ADT has been gracious enough to sponsor one of our fireside chats. So thank you very much to ADT for their participation, and not only that for their participation here, but for their participation at the Z-Wave Alliance. We value them very, very much, along with our other multiple hundreds of members. For those of you unaware, the Z-Wave Alliance is a group of companies that all adhere to one type of radio frequency or RF standard. Our standard is a completely open standard, and the SDO, or the Standard Development Organization at Z-Wave, governs that standard. So with that, I'm going to open up to some questions. So my first question actually is for Paulus. And the reason why it's for Paulus, you'll see in a moment, is we started with basic motion sensors, contact sensors, really basic stuff. What's the single biggest leap that you've seen in sensor capability over the last few years?
Yeah, I think, what we see like the last few years, I think where we came from, right? Like indeed contact sensors, and then we started to get a little bit smarter, like you listen to the audio and do like fire alarm, for example, that's the guys over there, or there's glass breaking in the corner, right? Like we got some bit more smart. Nowadays they call that AI, but it's just audio pattern detection. But you see actually more, what I think in the last 5 years is that the AI on the edge, of course, is coming. So we see a lot of cameras. We're doing like package detection, dog detection, car detection. That's all happening on the device. And then we don't send the camera picture over. We just send the signal over like, hey, we see a dog. But I think also we see in sensor land in the smart home itself, because, for example, Z-Wave long range, we can actually go further than just the home, right? So people are looking at their gates or like at other parts of their backyard where they want to do sensors. And the chicken coops is very popular, right?
Chicken coops. Who here has a chicken coop? Anybody have a chicken coop? Wow, that's awesome. Good for you. Yeah. Now I know who to ask for eggs. There we go. All right, good.
Smart chicken coop, door sensors.
Right, door sensors. There you go.
But yeah, I think that's the AI on the edge is where we see a lot of stuff happening.
So, to the rest of the panel as well, I mean, I know some of the cooler stuff that I have seen in new sensors, but I want to hear from you guys. What other kinds of cool sensors have you seen in the last, let's call it 3 to 5 years ago, that you didn't think was going to be possible, and now is almost every day.
I was going to say millimeter wave. I think there's a
There you
lot
go.
of
See, I was waiting, but I was going to say, see, we should have held like a little pool. Who was going to be the first one to say? All right.
I think, there's often technology problems get lumped into, is it a hardware problem or is it a software problem, primarily speaking? And for a while there, I think sensors detecting is someone in the room was more of a hardware problem. PIR works for motion, but when you sit still, it stops. And millimeter wave is a nice technology for knowing if someone's in the room, even if they're still. And I think from there, it really shifts to being more of a software problem. I think in 2025, I saw a lot of companies evolving how they're using millimeter wave in software. And I think the future, is really more about combining multiple sensors.
Oh, absolutely. And we should give a little shout out. Vision, one of our Z-Wave Alliance members who's here in our ballroom, is actually showing a millimeter sensor in the back of the room. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with millimeter sensors, go check them out when we're done. Dan, you look like you had something to say. Dan always has something to say.
Actually, Eric, I think said a lot of it for me. No, I think millimeter wave is really incredible. I think we've really only just scratched the surface of what it can do.
Yeah.
I've already seen some things here at the show that seem really promising about where it could go in terms of not just tracking people, but tracking objects that are moving throughout the home. So I think there's really a lot of potential for that in the years ahead.
Cool. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next question, and it's actually for Eric. So traditional room and motion sensors are being reimagined to move beyond simple triggers, right? So we're no longer about sort of the binary, I see movement, I don't see movement, and they're sort of entering into contextual awareness, which is something that we're starting to apply. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the evolution of these sensors going?
Yeah, so I think at first there was the software problem that I was talking about earlier of just knowing, having an easy setting for an end user to automate their home with when I'm in the room, the lights turn on, when I'm not in the room, the lights turn off, and not having to sort through all the edge cases that I'm sure everyone in this room has dealt with when trying to automate their home in any number of ways. And I think from there, like you're seeing a lot with millimeter wave, and you're seeing a lot with just in general understanding from a handful of different sensors, things like pose detection. Are you sitting in your chair? Are you in this part of the room or this part of the room, especially with an open floor plan? Some different cases there. So I think, it's more about just understanding, putting together multiple inputs and getting that context right for automation in ways where the end user isn't having to think about all those edge cases as much as hopefully the software they're using is guiding them that direction.
Makes perfect sense. Gilles, I know that ADT is doing a lot of work with this sort of contextual idea and bringing some of these together. Can you talk a little bit about how some of the sensors that you're putting in are gaining you insight as to what's going on within the home?
Yes, absolutely, and I'd like to echo a lot of the things have been mentioned so far. I mean, we look at it from a security lens, as you know, and in the world of security. So before ADT, I spent about 10 years at Google, working Google Nest, Chromecast, and all these things, and it's not the end of the world if once in a while your smart light switch gets out of sync in your app, right? I mean, it's not good, and you want to fix these bugs, but it's not the end of the world. Now, it's a very different story if your motion sensor or smoke alarm gets out of sync, so it doesn't trigger when it needs to. So that lens of reliability and scalability has been an eye-opener ever since I joined. I knew about it, but when you live it on a day in, day out, and to echo a lot of the things that have been mentioned earlier, what's really exciting to us is that we are moving from a world where we have traditional discrete sensors, right? A motion sensor, and they give you a piece of data, motion, no motion, to a system where you have a wealth of signals. I don't want to call them weak signals. I would call them nuanced or subtle signals. And then fusing them together doesn't give you data only. It gives you context, but more importantly, it gives you intent. So think about a world where now you see a motion in the entryway, but it's a certain time of the day, second signal, and the front door open and close, third signal, right? Now you can infer that probably someone living in that house just came home for the day, as opposed to have the pet walking around. And for us, that's very exciting because now we can talk about different words, but ambient sensing or intelligent sensing. So we can talk more about this, but that's been really exciting to us, and we're looking into this.
And it is, we talk about evolutionary versus revolutionary. This is really becoming revolutionary. So Dan, should homes aim to detect behavior or are we trying to really predict behavior?
I mean, I think the goal is both, but I would argue right now the industry still really needs to focus on accuracy and reliability. There are still a lot of sensors out there that are just not reliable and buggy and inconsistent.
No. Say it isn't so. Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add to that you know, for better or for worse, the tech industry as a whole has dove into AI, you know, head first. And
I hadn't noticed.
Yeah. And you know, as we all know, I'm sure everyone in this room, that AI can be very, you know, it tends to hallucinate. It can often just get things wrong and be very confident in how wrong it is. And that will only be worse if you have an unreliable data source.
Right.
So I really think the industry needs to take a step back there.
So it's interesting that you use that term data source. You know, I've used the term sensor a number of times now as we've been having this conversation. Just as easily, we could use the term data source or data generator, because really the business that we're all in, the business that ADT is in, the business that Jen writes about, the business that Paulus connects us all to, is all about data collection. So it's really all about how that data gets collected, and not only how it gets collected, but then how do we interact with that data. So we talk a lot about sensors, but in the end of the day, they're really just data collection devices. And so Jen, when you're looking, so if we look at it through that lens, and we're sort of looking at what sensing capabilities are, how is it sort of like inevitable that all of these things occur, or is it still sort of technically and commercially out of reach? How do we sort of go from the basic inside motion sensor to something that is much more sophisticated? And is it just evolutionary? Is it going to happen on its own? Or do you think that we've got to change the way we're doing things?
I think that's the biggest challenge in the smart home right now. I started writing about sensors for Wirecutter about 7 years ago. I wrote like a smart sensor guide, and I was trying to explain to people how to use these devices in their homes. And it's hard, it's complicated to set these things up. There are great solutions that you can have once you've got sensors working, but to get to that point, it's still too complicated. And actually with the technology that we're seeing with millimeter wave and all the new, like RF sensing is another really interesting, when we were talking about new, interesting sensing. I mean, I know it's not new, but it's gotten a lot better. When we talk about all these sensing capabilities, it's like, these are great, we can do so much with them, but if we struggle, if the people in this room struggle to make this work in our smart homes, the average consumer is never going to be able to grasp it. And now companies like ADT, Amazon, Home Assistant, you know, companies that work in the smart home space that can bring sensor fusion, that was the word we were using over here, together.
Fusion.
So
somebody's going to trademark that, right? You guys, somebody's already got the URL, sensor fusion? No? Okay.
I was at the Akara booth today, and they were showing off their spatial intelligence, you know, bringing all of the information from these sensors together and computing and using artificial intelligence. This is a place where it is really valuable. I think, but it needs to be distilled to the common denominator so that everyone can use and access these sensors simply. So I don't want to have to install little white boxes in every corner of my room. I do not want to put contact sensors on all my doors. If anyone's ever seen my reviews, I have like 17 on my doors. And this is just not something that people are prepared to do unless they're paying someone to do it for them. Right. And I think ultimately where we're going to move with sensing is the sensors are going to be in our devices. They're not going to be separate wall warts. I mean, I don't know if anyone spoke.
Wall acne, we used to call it, yes, wall acne.
There's a company, Doma, that launched last month. What month are we in? The Door, right. So and this brings me to my second point about the challenge is battery. So battery life is a significant issue with sensing, especially with millimeter wave. I mean, a lot of these newer technologies are very power hungry. Again, this is why putting sensing into devices that are mains powered, like into smart speakers or into televisions. I was just at the Amazon booth. They have millimeter wave sensing in their new TV. Samsung has millimeter wave sensing in their TVs, although they won't admit it, but they do.
There They're all taking a cue from Telly. Have you seen the Telly? Which
Yes, Telly.
At least is honest about the fact that they
About
want to
the
track
ads.
everything you do.
But once we can solve those pain points, I think once the everyday user gets to experience just the magic of sensors making your home work. You walk in the door, your lights turn on, your music starts playing. That's the dream, isn't it? The
It
door
is.
unlocks, UWB.
Right.
You walk in, it knows it's you, or millimeter wave can detect it's an adult versus a child. You walk in, your music starts playing. The light's set to your setting, the temperature sets to your setting. That's been the dream since day one. And then just my final point here is the thing I want to move away from, and I'm seeing everywhere, is visual sensing. I think
It's too creepy.
it's not, well, it's creepy, but I think it's the easy way out.
Oh, interesting.
Because using millimeter wave, RF sensing, that requires a lot of compute power and technology, but if we can do it locally, whereas vision, whilst it can be much more accurate, generally is going to rely on the cloud. So you're going to end up with latency,
Right.
and then you walk into a room and the lights don't turn on. That's where the smart home fails. So there's a lot of challenges in this space.
It's a lot. Okay, so this is very interesting, and I appreciate you just actually teed up my next question without even knowing that you're teeing up my next question. But Gilles, if you take what Jen has talked about, sort of this sensor fusion, which now you realize is now my most favorite phrase. I'm going to use this incessantly. I will send you a nickel for every one. It'll be a couple of bucks a day. But as you go through the sensor fusion, as you combine data sources from various sensors and they combine together within the home, how does that sort of affect in meaningful ways energy, security, right? So now I have all of this data. How am I going to take advantage of it?
So it's very interesting because when you put a lens of getting it wrong has real consequences in the security world, again, to double down on this, all the false positives or false negatives you can get with maybe like the RF sensing existing, this technology has been around for a while, echoes quite a bit. So that's number one I like to mention. So when we look at it, when you have one discrete signal input, you kind of guess, like if it's motion or whatever else. But when you have a series of them that you can not only fuse, but also orchestrate, and that's the important part where how we move from a smart home to an intelligent home.
Yes.
That's the feedback loop, right? Instead of building automations, nobody wants more automation. I don't think our customers want more automations or create more automations or more notifications. What would be ideal is that you are able to take into account all these signals, fuse them, or orchestrate them, and of course, AI has a huge role to play, and then take the right actions. So that's the important part. How do you take better actions in the energy world or whatever else it is relevant for our users based on that sensory input? It's not just for the sake of it. So for us, of course,
I have some ideas. We should talk after this.
yeah, I'm sure.
Okay.
And it's interesting because coming from sort of the tech world, and we spend a lot of time there, a lot of the optimization is about how do you optimize engagement, either way for ads or for media consumption.
Sure.
At ADT, we optimize for protection.
Yeah.
And so everything we think about is how do you concretely take the right action and provide the right feedback loop for users. So ideally, the system we want to build is a system that when it's wrong, it knows how to back off and adjust itself.
And adjust itself. That's really interesting. Eric, you had a comment, please.
Yeah, yes. So I think that's really great in optimizing for protection, but I think one of the key points to also consider there, a number of years ago I was testing a leak sensor that's tied to a security system, not on this panel, but I got the leak sensor wet to test it and then got all kinds of alerts from the app that there was a leak, and that's a great use for, I'm sure we have all have those sensors in our home. But the challenge was the app didn't give me an easy way to override and say, yes, I know what I'm doing. I know you saw this leak. I've dealt with it. We don't need to keep seeing like red alerts every time I open the app and all kinds of other notifications. And so I think there's just, as we try and intuit the context of what does the end user actually want at any given time, there should also be the side of the end user can tell us what's actually true or right when's necessary.
Well, so it's a really good point, Eric, and I was actually about to ask you this question was, how do we, in a sensor-rich environment though, how do we stop them from being overly complex or unpredictable for users? Right, so your example is well taken, and we've all experienced runaway sensors, right? There's always been the, it starts screaming, or the smoke detector that goes off and you have no idea why, but it knows that there's smoke someplace. So what kind of stopgaps do you put in place to create environments that are more predictable for the users?
I think one of those is a user override. Like I just mentioned, just being able to tell the software, tells the hardware that there's some context that it's not aware of, kind of overriding whatever's happening. But I think there's also another side of this, which is just around the ease of setup. There was one of the earlier millimeter wave sensors I was checking out on my channel. I had a complaint that it was loaded with all kinds of features of the things it could detect, kind of showing off the technology of what's possible with millimeter wave. But what about the customer who just wants an easy way of, I want the lights to come on when I go in my walk-in closet? And getting to the point where the sensors can scale from, I want that, to, I want a different light scene when I sit down on my couch in my big living room, and then also when I'm over here, I want a different light scene. There should be sort of this scale between the user who wants a very simple option to somebody who wants to really customize it to their heart's content.
Yeah, but Dan, there's more to it than that, right? Because if we have presence-driven intelligence, if we have these overly complicated sensors, how do we make them, or maybe we don't, but if they're going to start to feel seamless, and we're always going to risk it feeling sort of intrusive, how do we design it so that it doesn't? Or how do we get rid of the ick factor that we're being tracked by all of these really cool sensors?
I think for one, it depends on the sensing technology. I mean, I agree a lot with what Jen was saying. Like, we need to move away from the cameras. It just, for one, yeah, outside's fine. But there's just...
Unless you're in Illinois, and that's a whole different problem.
Yes. But yeah, we need to move away from the cameras. It's too intrusive. A lot of consumers don't, like regular consumers do not want them inside the home, or if they do, it's only in very specific, like common areas and very far from anything like a bedroom or a bathroom. And I think millimeter wave could actually really work well for this use case if we can just keep iterating on it and working on using it to better understand what's moving around the home, whether that's people or pets or objects, what have you.
Okay, so it's an interesting point that you make, and I think that it does sort of lead us to the next conversation, which is, now that I have sensor fusion, because sensor fusion is a very important thing, if I choose, please, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, I mean, we started with sensors, turn our lights on, right?
Sure.
Great. But ultimately, and maybe this is too tech forward, but ultimately what the smart home needs to be is a computer, right? And the smart home needs to respond to what happens in that computer, just like our cars do today,
Sure.
right? Sure. So ultimately, sensors need to feed into a system that is proactive, right? That's the vision, I think.
The vision, yes.
That the
yes.
home can react to what is happening without input from you, but with parameters that you have set. So it is not just going to...
It's not just running wild.
Just going to go wild,
Yes.
throw a party.
So,
but that it can respond. So, your HVAC system starts to fail. Your smart thermostat, it senses that there are issues, the house isn't cooling, even though it's calling for cooling, so that the home can proactively respond to what's happening, whether you need the home to actually adapt so that you're not freezing or you're not too hot. In fact, I actually had that issue when I was on vacation, and my poor bunny rabbit was in my home while we were gone, and the house, I got an alert from, it was the Ecobee app, that the house was like 92 degrees or something. Thankfully, it actually wasn't that hot. But, to be able to, for my home to have then, I don't know, been able to turn a fan on in the room where there was occupancy, and also send information to my HVAC
Yeah.
system management so that they could come out and fix it. And that is something we're starting to see, but there are concerns, obviously, around privacy and permissions. So we need to be able to set parameters of what we want, what we're willing to let the home do when we're not involved and we don't respond.
Right.
Because the other issue with sensors is notification fatigue. If you have too many sensors in your home, you know way too much about what's going on in it.
Right. Nope, absolutely.
I just wanted to echo this because it's exactly the sort of the feedback loop we need. I mean, when you have these kind of things, the system goes wired, like in terms of like the temperature, like the system needs to also take into account another signal, which is, well, the window is closed or open or something, and self-regulate.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. It's not like you need a ton of AI on this. You could still have a very like predictable sort of if sort of statement, even in some simple cases. But for some reason, it's still not in place in a reliable manner, right? So I just wanted to add this little thing.
No, and it's an important point. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just frustrating. I'm gonna, choke on my own breath.
Never heard Avi so quiet.
Let's embrace the moment.
It's a problem. Okay, but now that we have sensor fusion, now that we're collecting all the data, and if we get to choose which sensors we want, most people are going to choose them not based on the RF protocol that they're actually communicating with. Although everybody knows that Z-Wave is the best. Okay, there, I said it. That being said, though, interoperability becomes really key. So, Paulus, as we move towards that, how does interoperability genuinely accelerate innovation? Can interoperability do that?
It can definitely do it. So the power of interoperability is that you have an open system. It means that the things you put in your house today, if they're interoperable, the systems of the future can actually read out that data without asking you to put like another contact sensor on the door, right? Like, we can read out that existing contact sensor. We see that with Z-Wave, ZigBee, Matter, right? Like, all of a sudden, we are not competing who can best control a light bulb, right? You have platforms like Home Assistant that can control all these light bulbs together and do work for you. Turn them on, turn them off when motion is detected. You can start seeing innovation because there's many different ways to make a motion sensor, right? Like a motion sensor can be powered by mmWave, it can be powered by the old school pair motion. Well, from an interoperability perspective, from a smart home perspective, motion is motion. And so you can actually this interoperability layer makes that compatible, that all the old solutions that work with motion to turn on light can now work with a new motion sensor that just fits into that slot.
Yep, it makes perfect sense. But look, interoperability is great, but now we get down to things like safeguards, right? So now we're collecting all this data. Where does it go? How is it private? What does it get used for? So, Gilles, what safeguards are essential? How do we maintain the privacy and the trust in the homes? You guys deal with security every day. It's paramount. How does that affect everybody?
We do. So I'll start with this, and then I'll jump on interoperability and some other things that are also exciting along these lines. But if you look at an ADT systems today, it is really local first. Like we need to preserve the integrity and the security of a home and the folks within the home in case of an outage, Wi-Fi outage. So we have redundancy systems, but our base, as an example, is fully functional in case of an outage. We are UL certified for this reason. We have LTE backup and so on. So it's been part of the DNA of the security ecosystem. That's the beauty of it. I mean, it's actually fascinating because, in a non-biased way, I would argue that the security use case in a smart home is like the most critical one. And once you have a foot in the house from a security and protection perspective, the rest is really an augmentation. Yeah. And that leads me to interoperability and open standards. As you may have noticed, and it's quite, I was very intrigued by this, a lot of the security systems are wall-gardened. Yes. And they've been very successful at it.
For many years.
Yeah, and we know the protocols and so on.
Absolutely.
And Z-Wave has been along the way for the ride, and we've been supporting Z-Wave for a long, long time for the smart home devices.
There's always been this demarcation between life safety and lifestyle.
Yeah, but how do you really want to fulfill the promise we just discussed in different terms if you have this sort of like wall in between, differentiations between smart home on one side and smart security or security devices or sensors? It's all the same, and so should it be. We believe at ADT that it should be this. We want to blaze the trail to to embrace open standards. Z-Wave is one of them.
Yes.
It's not the only one.
Not the only one. No.
Matter is another one. They all, I mean, Z-Wave is actually has a level of maturity and in terms of the security that we really, really think is critical. Z-Wave long range leads in terms of the star topology, not to go too much in the weeds, is critical from a security perspective. It makes things a lot more predictable. There's about 1.2 kilometers, I think, of range in a real use case. We're not talking just line of sight because that's a lot more. When you jump from a plane.
Line of sight was 7 miles.
7 miles. The last
That's right.
From the summit, we proved 7 miles. That's true.
And we think this is really where our energy should be spent. Because now, all of a sudden, you have series sensors that communicate with Z-Wave long range. You have home sensors, traditional smart home sensors, and now they can all participate to that ecosystem. They can all fuel the same signals, speaking the same language. Why is it important? For us, it's like a ball of oxygen. For us, it's less engineering you spend trying to integrate. For our users, it's also a ball of oxygen. It's actually, quite frankly, it streamlines the entire setup experience. They don't even have to worry if it's Z-Wave or Matter. They shouldn't. They may know these terms, but what they should know is that they open an app, they have a unified experience, and it works. It just doesn't work on day one. It works on day 1,000. It works after the nth OTA.
Exactly.
And that's where the guardrails come in play as well. Us, on the security world, cannot afford to have a single OTA that degrades the experience or breaks the experience. So I love this because, and I'll probably stop after that because this is a lovely topic, but you have to function and evolve. I mean, the revolution or innovation is really an evolution on a lot of existing technologies, and we have to be patient about this, but we also need constraints. The constraints that it needs to work at all times in a simple way is a wonderful constraint. It's hard, and we have to be patient to navigate through this with all our partners, but it will eventually converge, and we know that open always wins in the end.
It's very true. It's very true. No, I appreciate that. Although I am wondering, like, where were you 15 years ago when I used to debate with your predecessors why they should limit? Never.
Avi, you're teasing me. No, you tease me too much. 15 years ago, I was solving that same problem in the web world with HTML5.
Right.
So we can. That's a different conversation.
There you go. So, to that end, so we've discussed a lot of different things here, right? We've discussed convergence, we've discussed integration, we've discussed interoperability, we've discussed data collection. But here's an interesting one, and I'm going to throw it out there because I have a couple of, I do. Good, I can go back a step. But when you look across today's smart home ecosystems, right, who's doing the best job? Who's supporting advanced sensors? Oh, yes, I am. Oh, yeah. Who's doing the best job? Advanced sensors, center, right? More importantly, so one of the strengths of the Z-Wave Alliance is that when we do something within the Alliance, all members gain access to that feature, right? So Z-Wave Long Range, Credential Command Class, the new Wake on Event node, all get exposed to all of our members. So what are you seeing in the industry, and what can the industry learn from the guys that are doing, the people, sorry, that's an old-timer problem, the people doing it well in the industry. And I'll throw it out to the whole group because I want to hear from each and every one of you. So, who goes first? Remember, the one who goes first gets the easy answer.
I'll go first.
There you go.
And it will be a non-answer, so forgive me, and then I'll pass the torch. Because I don't think the system is quite there yet. And let me elaborate on this. We've talked about all the right ingredients. That's the beauty of it. But here's the execution comes in place. Somebody is going to have to execute properly on this one. So what are the ingredients? They are the ability to collect nuanced signals, the ability to orchestrate them with the right guardrails, and the ability to infer an intent and take the right action with the right feedback loop in a reliable manner at scale on all the use cases, including the ones that involve people's lives.
Oh, yes.
So that will be the best system.
Agreed.
Needless to tell you that some of us are working on this.
Well, I would hope most of us in the room are working on it. Whether or not we've achieved it yet, that's a completely different issue. So, Dan, you're next, man.
In terms of which ecosystem is doing the best,
Who do you like?
Oh
Come
boy.
on. Rubber meets the road. Are those cameras? Those cameras are on, right? We're running. We're going. Okay, good. There we go.
I will say I think I actually think there's a lot of potential with Alexa, of all things. With Alexa Plus, I was actually pleasantly surprised by some of the automation that it is enabling. So I think they're on an interesting path that could really go far. But again,
That's
it's
okay.
AI, so you
only have to give one. You don't have to give more. That's okay. And that's an interesting one. And I actually tend to agree with you on that, having experienced Alexa Plus in my own house. But it is a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Right,
absolutely.
it's a work in
I
progress.
just think there is interesting potential that you can sort of glean
Yes.
there. And as I was saying earlier, there's still a long way to go with
but
AI.
if it says easy peasy lemon squeezy to me one more time, I'm going to throw it against the wall. So, Eric, who's your favorite?
So I'm going to also take a little bit of a different route here and say that it's multiple ecosystems. I have plenty of viewers who tell me that they use multiple different smart home systems in their home. And I think with all the interoperability standards that we have today, it's making that more possible. And it used to be, are you in this ecosystem or this ecosystem? Right. And I think it's also kind of a differentiation between maybe the brains of your smart home with something like Home Assistant or Homey and the UI of your smart home that might be tied to the smartphone you own, or some other system that's convenient for you in your house. And I think the last thing to think about with those integration points that I wanted to mention with what Gilles was saying earlier is the sensors that we talked about at the beginning is really just about collecting data points of signal for your home to react to. And one of the things that I always talk about of why would someone want to get a security system that integrates with your smart home systems is because I think there's, when you arm your home away, that's a really clear signal to your smart home of I'm leaving the house. Right. It's not your phone location tracking you when you ran down to your neighbor's house and you're not actually leaving the home, but for maybe 15 minutes, it's I'm actually intentionally leaving the home. Here's a clear signal of it to start other automation.
Well, we know who Paul's answer is going to be, right? Can we skip Paul?
Alexa Plus. Now, so for me, obviously I'm going to get to Home Assistant, but I want to actually, for me, what I look at is like what makes it best smart home system is not just what it does today, but like the intention with why it's being built, right? There are smart home hubs today with screens you can put in your living room. Well, they're also full of ads. Right, and like you cannot turn them off, and they keep getting more invasive, or you buy them without ads and ads get added. And this is why with Home Assistant we are part of the Open Home Foundation, and there's very clear we don't do ads, we don't take your data, we are not interested in it, we keep all that local, and so Home Assistant is the very best solution for it to be the brains of your smart home, right? And because you have your data local, you can do with it what you want. Maybe you want to use HomeKit, Apple Home, Siri, you want to send it to Google, you want to send it to Alexa. All these things are possible because it's your data and you're in control, right? And this is where Home Assistant bring everything in the world, every device is getting into Home Assistant. And from there on, I think everybody should have a Home Assistant and then see, oh, what do I want to do? Do I want to do Google or Amazon or these kind of things?
And now the guru will answer the question.
Well, no one. I mean, no one's really doing it very well. So, I mean, everyone is doing something interesting. That there's positive aspects of most of the platforms. I do actually agree with Dan that Amazon, with its Alexa platform, has been the most proactive in this space since. For a long time. I mean, they started with you could connect Zigbee sensors to the Echo speakers way back when. But like a lot of Amazon things, it's always a little half finished.
The app is garbage.
I mean, like you can connect it, but then trying to do the next...
Jamie, are you listening? Can you hear us?
Trying to do the next stage of actually automating multiple things rather than perhaps just your lights. I had a lot of hope for Google Home, but I
think we all did.
Waiting still.
Yes, I think we all did.
I mean, we can't even get buttons right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just the complexity is still too high, as I said earlier, and all of the platforms, I think, struggle with making it simple. Even Home Assistant.
Yes.
Yeah, because it is, and this is where actually I think ultimately for the regular consumer, really, and this is the big problem with Amazon and Google is that they've moved away from local. They're moving towards with AI, it's their excuse to go back to the cloud. They had started to come local, they've moved away. And local is just so much easier for users, but it's harder to set up, right? So what I think we're seeing more and more of is the binding, which I know goes way back, but devices that just work with other devices automatically. And this isn't maybe for this crowd because we like to have 17 things happen when the motion detects us, but most people just want 1 or 2 things to happen.
Really? You say so. I've never met one of them. But then again,
And we've seen a lot of that here at the show this week. Devices that come paired with a sensor or something that, lights that come with remotes. It seems like almost going backwards, but it's actually a really simple, intuitive way to use smart home devices. And then, bring you to the next step. Now you can, if you want to do more, you can move forward from that. Right. But just having the simple, easy way, rather than tearing your hair out trying to get your lights to turn on with a motion sensor, and not do it when your dog walks past.
What I fall back on, whenever I hear comments like that, what I fall back on is the fact that there is help out there, right? There's an entire industry of professionals that will assist people in their endeavor of creating a smart home. And it's always interesting to me that, yes, there is definitely a lowest common denominator of the DIY person, right? But I think more and more we're seeing the do-it-for-me's, the DIFMs. And I think if more people were to embrace smart home through a professional channel, it doesn't have to be the $100,000 Crestron system, but I do believe that there are professionals out there that can assist in sort of middle market systems. And I think that we overlook that sometimes in sort of how we put these systems together. Because I'm usually the guy that gets the phone call from my neighbor who says, hey, you know this smart home stuff, can you come over and help me? Like, I'm usually the guy. So, all right, now it's time for everybody's favorite question. Because I've got a few minutes left, and you all know it's coming, but here it is. 10 years from now, what does a standards-driven smart home ecosystem look like? Because 10 years ago, it was well, no, I can't say that word. Wait, no. It was difficult. There you go. It was difficult. So 10 years from now, is there Matter 2.0? Are we struggling with another new standard because we need a standard to unify all of our standards? Or what do you think? Go ahead.
Look, historically, when you look at it, and I don't want to kind of go too way back, but if you look even at the mid-'80s with PostScript on the printer world, we mentioned 15 years ago in the browser world. So we can safely extrapolate. 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, because it's non-linear. Time seems to accelerate, but we know that standards will be kind of orchestrating all these. Then if it won't be, we probably have a sense it won't be a monopoly. It'll be a few standards. Matter seems to be with Z-Wave really in a good position. There may be others, but for the most part, because we have a North Star and we're all pushing in the same direction, it will have converged significantly from a customer perspective. It won't be perfect, and we know that. It also will have moved the accountability at a different part of the stack, right? So from drivers, you go to OS. From plugins, you go to browsers. Now, from devices, you go probably from an AI orchestrated layer. That will be where the accountability resides, right? Now, that's my simple answer. Now, the kid in me, don't forget that 10 years ago, when we talked about how will autonomous cars or driving will be in 10 years, we all will be very skeptical that one day Waymos will be the next Uber in a city like San Francisco for the 1%ers of us. So last year, the same event, we could have been skeptical about humanoid type of robots. So I do think that 10 years from now, on top of everything we've just discussed, that will be table stakes for like 90% of the population. There will be for the rest of the 10% an amazing pulling and driving force towards something which is totally sci-fi, which is humanoid robots that will also enable us to some of that. Can we be skeptical? We should be skeptical. Sure. But is it becoming more real enough that we can also hope?
Walk the show floor, right?
Yes. Could we lean on AI in a physical manner to also help us simplify this? Why do we even have to worry about installing these devices or configuring them and so on and so forth? So there's a little bit of that part also that we need to put in the equation.
No, great. Thank you. Dan?
Sci-fi is great, and I want to live in that world, but ideally in 10 years, where I really want us to be is at a place where the whole interoperability conundrum is largely behind us. If this industry
We've
is
been
ever...
saying that for 40 years, my friend. I've been here a long time.
But if this industry is ever going to go mass market and truly leave the early adopter stage, we need to solve that problem. We need to be at a place where consumers can go into a Best Buy, a Home Depot, a Costco, buy whatever that light bulb or plug or what have you it is off the shelf and hook it up to their ADT or hook it up to their home assistant and be in a place where it largely just works. That's where I want to be.
You heard it here first, folks. That's our goal. That's all right. Jen wins.
There's a saying, it might be a quote from someone, and I'm sorry I don't remember the specific source, but there's a saying I've heard multiple times of just, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. And I think that's a lot of what we see in smart home tech. And what I would like to see, I think, in newer homes especially, because I think that's an area where we can push smart home tech further a little faster than existing homes, is just having a purchase of a newer home where a lot of the tech installed can then just work with your smart home. So the builder installs switches, the builder installs contact sensors or a security system, and then you, as the owner of the home, can bring whatever system you want to make that smart, or collection of systems. And I think that's kind of the difference between then the physical hardware in the home that then might also remain, ideally, for future buyers a decade later, would be kind of separated from how do I make all this talk in a smart way. But that gets to Dan's point about interoperability just being a real barrier to that vision.
All right, Mr. Paulus, please, sir.
Yeah, I always find it very difficult. But I think in 10 years, we're still just going to have light switches when you enter a room. You know, because you always need to fall back, right? And I think, but there will be a lot of more, as standards grow, right? We're going to put more things in our standards, right? For example, we have heat pumps and energy management and solar systems that are not even really being covered by any standard yet that we have in the smart home, yet is the biggest driver of our bills. It's like, how can we take that control? So get control of how we do energy, how we do climate, access control or knowing who's there. That also should be more standardized. And it would be nice if it's one standard, but I don't know, Zigbee 4.0 with sub-gigahertz just got announced like last month or something, right? Like
I don't want to talk about that. That's look at the logo, buddy. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No.
But,
look, the more the merrier. The more the merrier.
More the merrier. But I think, hopefully getting everything in one place would be very nice.
And very appropriately, Ms. Toohey, the last word is yours.
So when Dan's science fiction becomes reality, I
will be long gone by then.
I think, so that, interoperability, wow, that is a tough one, is the hardest part. But once that's solved, what I would like to see, and I would like this to be in a decade, is a smart home that can be proactive and manage itself for us, so that I don't have to worry about making sure the lights turn off at night, or making sure the doors are locked, or, all of that. Because there's a lot you can do with a smart home that's fun and cool, but the basic stuff, the energy management, the security, the lighting, that should be relatively simple to solve. And having a central brain in your home that manages all of that for you without you having to troubleshoot or program, that's the dream, really. And it's a relatively simple dream. And, I think we can get there with interoperability being solved in the science fiction future. The sort of sentient home managing everything for you, not necessarily with a humanoid robot, but and
so we have one vote against robots.
Close calls with some robots this week, so I'm not feeling particularly happy about them.
About the robots, okay.
So I feel like we're a little bit closer to that happening in 10 years than we were 10 years ago.
Good enough. Well, I've been promising clients this since, I think, 1991. So you'll excuse me if I'm a little cynical about what maybe the next 10 years are going to bring. But I would like to thank my panel. You guys have been absolutely outstanding. Thank you so much for the time and effort that you put into this. Thank you all for being here this evening. We've got about another hour. Yep, another hour for you to network, get to know one another. Turn off your flashlight. All of us, thank you very much for being here, for participating. Get to know the vendors around the room. They've taken a lot of time and effort to be here. One of some of the cool stuff, we have a smart dog crate. I guarantee no matter where you go on the show floor, you will not see a smart dog crate. So thank you very much to ADT for sponsoring. Thank you very much to the team for putting this together. And thank you very much to my panel.